You know she used to be slim like me back in school. Small, fine girl. Now look at her. She has turned into a whole pig since then, eating Gary and sleeping. She looks so big like a pig.
She called her a pig in front of her fiancé, in front of his whole family, and everybody laughed, including the man she was about to marry. Nobody in that room knew that 3 days later, the woman laughing loudest would be on her knees, begging her not to speak.
Stay till the end, because what happened next is not what you think. And if you've ever been humiliated by someone you loved,
you need to hear this story.
Before we go further, please help us like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.
Her name was Folake, and for 11 years, she had been the best friend of a woman named Adenike. Understand something before we go any further. Adenike was not always cruel. She was not born wicked. If you had met her in secondary school the way Folake met her, you would have loved her the way Folake loved her. She was the girl who shared her lunch when Folake's mother couldn't afford to give her anything. She was the girl who held Folake's hand at her father's funeral when Folake was 15 years old and did not know how to stand up straight from grief. For a long time, Adenike was the closest thing Folake had to a sister. But people change. Or maybe they don't change. Maybe they simply stop hiding who they were underneath all along. By the time they were both 29, Folake was working 2 jobs. She sold fabric by day at Balogun Market, and at night she did makeup for brides on weekends, squeezing herself into Danfo buses with her kid's bag balanced on her knees, chasing appointments across Lagos. She was not rich. Let's not pretend she was rich. Her studio apartment in Ojota had one standing fan that rattled like it was arguing with the ceiling, and some nights she ate Gary and groundnut for dinner because that was what was in the house. Adenike, on the other hand, had become somebody. She ran an event planning company that had grown from nothing into something people in Lekki actually respected. She drove a Toyota Camry she was still paying off, but never told anyone that part. She wore lace and gele to Owambe parties like she had been born wearing them. And 2 years before this story, she met a man named Adewale. Adewale was not from Lagos originally. His family had money, old money, oil and gas money, the kind of money that builds houses in Banana Island and doesn't ask permission from anybody. He was tall, soft-spoken, and he treated Adenike like she was the answer to a prayer he didn't know he had prayed. Within a year, he proposed. Within 18 months, the wedding planning had begun in earnest, and Adenike, Folake's Adenike, had started to change in ways Folake told herself she was imagining. Adenike stopped calling as often. She started correcting the way Folake dressed when they went out together. Small comments, little pinches disguised as jokes.
Folake, when last did you buy new clothes?
Folake laughed those off. She told herself that was just Adenike being Adenike, that underneath the sharp tongue was still the girl who held her hand at her father's grave. She was wrong, but she did not know she was wrong yet. That is the nature of betrayal. It never announces itself. It creeps in through the back door wearing the face of someone you trust. There is a day worth remembering, though Folake did not recognize it as a turning point back then. They were 24. Adenike had just landed her first big solo contract, a society wedding in Ikoyi, and she called Folake at midnight, breathless, saying she could not do the vendor negotiations alone because her tongue was not sharp enough yet for that kind of room. Folake went with her. She sat beside her in meetings with caterers and decorators 3 times their age, feeding her the confidence she borrowed from Folake like you borrow sugar from a neighbor, casually, without thinking twice about giving it back. That wedding was the beginning of everything for Adenike. Nobody at that Ikoyi reception ever knew Folake's name.
Folake did not mind, not at first. There's a kind of love that finds its meaning in being useful. And she had grown up believing that was the only kind of love available to a girl like her. A girl whose father died with nothing, whose mother sold pepper on the roadside to keep 2 children in school uniforms. Adenike's family had more, not much more, but enough that she never fully understood what it meant to calculate whether transport fare would leave enough for dinner. That difference between them never went away. It just changed shape as the years passed, the way a wound changes shape as it scars over without ever fully closing. Now, the dinner. Because everything that happened after started that night in a restaurant in Victoria Island with white tablecloths and candles that cost more than Folake's weekly transport fare. Adenike had asked Folake to come. She said it was important, that Adewale's parents were flying in from Port Harcourt and she wanted her closest people around her. Sit with that word for a second. Closest. That is what she called Folake 3 days before she destroyed her in front of everyone at that table. Folake borrowed money from Mama Kemi, her landlady, to buy a new outfit for that dinner. Mama Kemi is a woman in her 60s who has lived in that compound in Ojota longer than Folake had been alive. A woman with a mouth so sharp it could slice yam without a knife, but a heart that had fed half the street when times were hard. She watched Folake putting on her new dress that evening, and she said something Folake did not understand then, but understands now.
Folake, why are you dressing up to go and be laughed at? Mama, you're talking nonsense. Adenike is my sister. But they will mock.
Mama Kemi sopped her teeth and said, a sister does not need 3 days' notice to remember your birthday, but she can call you at midnight to help her cry over a man. Folake did not answer her. She picked up her bag and left for the restaurant because she did not yet have the ears to hear what she was being told. Let's paint the picture properly, because you need to feel that room the way Folake felt it. The restaurant was beautiful, no point pretending otherwise. Soft jazz playing from somewhere unseen, waiters gliding between tables like they were on wheels, the smell of grilled fish and expensive wine drifting over white cloth. Adewale's parents were warm people, surprisingly warm for people with that kind of money. His mother hugged Folake when she arrived and told her Adenike had spoken about her for years. That should have been a warning. If Adenike had spoken about Folake for years, she had also decided somewhere along the way what kind of story to tell about her. They were maybe 40 minutes into the dinner. Wine had been poured, Adewale's father had told a joke that made the table erupt, and then Adewale, meaning no harm at all, turned to Folake and asked what work she did. Folake opened her mouth to answer. She was proud of her work, even if it did not come with a Camry or a Lekki address. She sewed for brides, she did makeup that made women cry when they saw themselves in the mirror on their wedding day. That is not nothing. That is sacred work. But before she could speak, Folake laughed, that bright performative laugh she had started doing since the engagement, the laugh that existed only for an audience. And she said,
Folake does small things here and there. You know she used to be slim like me back in school? Small, fine girl. Now look at her. She has turned into a whole pig since then. Eating Gary and sleeping, that's her business plan.
and she laughed again, loud and long, and put her hand on Adewale's arm, like they were sharing an inside joke. Adewale gave an awkward little chuckle. The kind of laugh that comes out before a man has decided how he feels about something. The kind that dies halfway through when it realizes it has no company. His mother's smile faltered. She looked down at her plate, and a flush of embarrassment crossed her face as she tried and failed to hide behind her wineglass. His father did not laugh at all. He simply watched. First Adenike, then Folake, then his son. The way a man watches a room when he is quietly filing something away for later. Folake sat there. She did not cry, not there in front of them. She smiled. She actually smiled, the way women are trained to smile when they are humiliated in public, the way many of us are trained to swallow shame like pepper soup so nobody sees us choke. And in the silence after Adenike's laugh, because it was, in the end, only Adenike's laugh, ringing alone in a room that had gone suddenly quiet, Folake understood something with a clarity she had never had before. Nobody at that table thought she deserved to be mocked, but nobody said so either. And somehow, that was its own kind of wound, to watch 3 people recognize cruelty and let it pass unchallenged, because correcting the bride-to-be felt more dangerous than protecting the woman she had just wounded. But something in her closed that night. Something that had been open for 11 years. A door, a room, a whole section of her heart that had Adenike's name written over it. That door closed quietly, and she did not know yet what would happen behind it. Folake kept smiling for the rest of that dinner. She asked Adewale's mother about the flight from Port Harcourt. She complimented the wine, though she knew nothing about wine. She laughed,
actually laughed at a joke Adewale's father made about traffic on the Third Mainland Bridge because that is what some of us are taught to do, to keep the room comfortable even while we are bleeding quietly under the tablecloth. Adenike did not look at her again for the rest of the evening. She had gotten what she wanted. The laugh, the warmth of the room turning briefly toward her at Folake's expense, and she moved on to the next topic as though nothing had happened. Already the center of attention again, already forgetting Folake the way you forget a chair once you have finished sitting on it. That was the part that stayed with Folake longest, if we are honest. Not the insult itself, the forgetting. The speed with which Adenike moved on, as though the humiliation had cost her nothing, as though Folake had spent 11 years being exactly the kind of friend who never once made her feel small in front of strangers. There was one more thing that happened that night, though Folake did not learn of it until much later. After the dinner ended, as the drivers were being called and goodbyes exchanged in the restaurant's marble lobby, Adewale's mother pulled her son aside for a moment, out of earshot of everyone, including Adenike. She said only one sentence to him, quietly, the way older women often deliver the sentences that matter most. She said, "A woman who can humiliate her closest friend in public may one day humiliate her husband." Adewale did not answer her. He simply nodded, the way a son nods at his mother when he is not yet ready to agree out loud, but the sentence had already found a place to sit inside him, waiting. If you're still here, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, because trust us, the story is only just beginning, and what happens next will surprise you. Folake left the dinner an hour later, hugging everyone goodbye, thanking Adewale's parents for their warmth, kissing Adenike on the cheek like nothing had happened. She took a bike back to Ojota because she could not afford anything else, and the wind on her face the whole way home felt like the only honest thing that had touched her all night. Mama Kemi was sitting outside her flat when Folake got back, as she always was, fanning herself with an old church program. She took one look at Folake's face and did not say, "I told you so." She simply opened her arms, and Folake walked into them and cried the way she had refused to cry in that restaurant. Ugly, shaking, 11 years of friendship dissolving out of her eyes onto Mama Kemi's wrapper. "She called me a pig," Folake said, "in front of everybody, in front of the man she's marrying." Mama Kemi held her and said something Folake would never forget. "My daughter, a woman who mocks you to make herself shine has already decided she needs your shadow to look tall. The question is not why she did it. The question is why you have been standing where your shadow can be used." Folake did not fully understand her that night. She understood her 3 days later. Because here is the thing nobody tells you about people like Adenike. People who build themselves up by tearing others down in public. They do it because somewhere underneath the lace and the gele and the Camry and the Lekki address, they are frightened. They are frightened that if the room ever sees the truth, they would be the ones laughed at. And Adenike had a truth only Folake knew. A truth Folake had carried for 11 years and never once used against her, not even when Adenike made small comments about her weight. Not even when she stopped calling as often. Not even when she corrected her clothes in public. Because Folake loved her, or told herself she loved her, or because loyalty had become such a habit that she did not know how to put it down. You need to understand what this truth was, because it changes everything about this story. 6 years before that dinner, when Adenike was 23 and Folake was 23, both still finding their feet in Lagos, Adenike worked as an assistant at an event company owned by a woman named Madame Florence. It was her first real job in the industry, the job that taught her everything she now built her business on. In her second year there, money went missing from Madame Florence's account. Not a small amount, almost 800,000 naira moved out over several months in small transfers made to look like vendor payments. Adenike took that money. Folake knows this because Adenike told her herself, crying in Folake's one-room apartment at 2 in the morning, terrified that Madame Florence's auditor was closing in. She had taken it to pay off a debt her older brother owed to men who were not the sort of men you owe money to for long. She had panicked. She had done something desperate and wrong, and she came to Folake because Folake was the only person she trusted with the truth of who she really was underneath the polish. And Folake helped her. She helped her build a spreadsheet that made the transfers look like a bookkeeping error rather than theft. She sat with her while she wrote a letter of resignation before anyone could formally accuse her. She lied to Madame Florence's face when she called, because Folake and Adenike had once worked a wedding together and Madame Florence trusted Folake, and Folake told her she believed it was an honest accounting mistake and that Adenike was too devastated by the accusation to come back to the office. The fear in Adenike's eyes that week is something Folake remembers better than almost anything else from their 20s. Adenike did not sleep. She lost weight so fast her collarbone started showing through her blouses. She told Folake more than once that if this came out, she would rather disappear from Lagos entirely than face her mother's shame. Her mother, a retired school teacher who had scraped together every kobo to send her to a private university, who believed her daughter was proof that hard work could lift a household out of struggle. Folake understood that fear. She understood, too, the desperation that makes a person do something they know is wrong because the alternative feels like death. So she did not judge Adenike the way the world might have judged her. She simply helped her disappear the evidence and rebuild quietly in the shadow of her own silence. Adenike left that job with her reputation quietly intact, and she used everything she learned there to build the company that made her rich enough to catch a man like Adewale. And in 11 years, she never once thanked Folake properly for what she did. She simply absorbed it the way people absorb the sacrifices of those who love them, as though it was owed to her, as though Folake existed to catch her when she fell and then disappear back into the wall until she needed catching again.
Folake never told anyone this story, not once. Not even Mama Kemi knew the full details, only that something serious had happened between Adenike and an old employer years back. Folake kept Adenike's secret safe for 6 years while she built a kingdom on top of it. And then, Adenike called her a pig in front of the man she was marrying, and something in Folake finally asked the question she should have asked years earlier. Why was she still protecting a woman who had stopped protecting her? She did not go looking for revenge. What happened was smaller and stranger and in its own way more frightening because it was not something she did. It was something the truth did once she finally stopped holding the door shut for it. 3 days after that dinner, Madame Florence, the same woman Adenike had stolen from 6 years earlier, reached out to Folake, not about Adenike. She had no idea Folake was even still close to her. Madame Florence was expanding her business and needed a reliable makeup and styling contractor for a string of high society weddings, and someone had recommended Folake from a bridal shoot she had done the year before. It had nothing to do with Adenike at all. It was pure coincidence, the kind of coincidence that makes you wonder if the universe keeps a ledger of its own. They met for coffee at a small place off Admiralty Way, the kind of place with good lighting and bad Wi-Fi, and Madame Florence talked for 20 minutes before she got anywhere near the point. Folake liked her. She was a woman who had built something from nothing the way Folake was still trying to, and there was a warmth in how she spoke about her business, an unguarded pride that reminded Folake a little of herself when she talks about a bride's face on her wedding morning. And somewhere in the middle of that meeting, Madame Florence mentioned almost in passing that she was now working with a new events partner on some of her bigger jobs, a partner whose name, when she said it, made Folake's stomach drop. Adenike. It turned out that in the 6 years since she left Madame Florence's company, Adenike's business had grown so large and Madame Florence's business had grown large enough in a different direction that their paths had crossed again, this time as equals, potential collaborators on a major wedding expo that could set both their companies up for the rest of the year. Madame Florence did not remember the old accounting mystery as theft.
She remembered it, vaguely, as an unpleasant chapter she had moved past. She had no reason to suspect the woman she was now doing business with was the same person who quietly stole from her all those years ago. Folake sat there, with her coffee going cold in her hands, and she understood, for the first time, the full shape of the choice in front of her. She could say nothing. She could let the past stay buried, the way she had always let it stay buried, and continue being the invisible woman who protected Adenike from herself, while Adenike called her a pig at dinner parties. Or she could tell the truth and let whatever happen, happen. She did not decide that day. This is not a story about a woman who became cruel the moment she was given power. She went home and sat with Mama Kemi that night and told her everything, the whole story, 6 years of silence, all of it, and asked her what she thought she should do. Mama Kemi was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Folaki, I am not going to tell you to destroy her, because revenge eats the hand that holds it before it reaches the enemy. But I will tell you this, silence that protects a wicked heart is not loyalty. It is slavery wearing loyalty's clothes. You do not have to burn her life down, but you also do not have to keep lying to hold it up." Folake thought about that for a long time, and then something happened that took the decision partly out of her hands.
10 days after the dinner, Adenike called Folake. It was the first time she had called since that night, and her voice was different, thinner, faster, with an edge of panic she had only heard once before, 6 years earlier, in her one-room apartment at 2 in the morning. Adenike said Madam Florence's accountant had begun a routine audit ahead of the Wedding Expo partnership, standard due diligence before any large joint contract, and in the process of reviewing old company records for continuity purposes, something had resurfaced. Not proof, not yet, just a flag in historical transfer records from 6 years back that an old, half-forgotten intern had apparently noticed while digitizing paper files. Madam Florence had not connected it to Adenike specifically, but it was there, sitting in a folder, waiting for someone to look closely enough. Adenike was calling not to apologize. She was calling to ask Folake again to help her, to coach her on what to say if Madam Florence's people came asking, to lie for her one more time, the way Folake always had. And this is the part of the story where everything Folake thought she knew about herself was tested. Folake told her she needed to think about it. Adenike did not like that answer. Her voice sharpened, the way it always did when she felt the ground shifting beneath her. She said,
Folake, after everything I have done for you, this is how you want to treat me? You want to watch me suffer?
Sit with the audacity of that sentence for a moment. After everything I have done for you. In 11 years, Adenike could not name one thing she had done for Folake that came close to what Folake had done for her. And in that moment, on that phone call, something in Folake that had been bent for 11 years finally straightened. She said,
Adenike, do you remember what you called me at that dinner? In front of Adewale's parents? Please, Folake, please. If this comes out, I will lose everything. Adewale will leave me. His family will never accept me. Please.
and here is the moment, the real turning point of this whole story, the moment you need to understand clearly, because it is not the moment you think it is. Folake did not call Madame Florence. Sit with that. She did not call Madame Florence. She did not send an email. She did not leak a single document because revenge was never actually what she wanted, no matter how badly that dinner had wounded her. What she wanted, what she had wanted for 11 years without knowing how to ask for it, was for Adenike to see her, to see what she had carried for her, to understand that her loyalty was not a bottomless well Adenike could keep drawing from while insulting the woman standing at the edge of it. So she told her something different. She said,
I am not going to expose you, Adenike. I never wanted to hurt you. But I am done protecting you in silence while you humiliate me in public. If you want my help this time, you will have to earn it. Not with money, not with promises, but with the truth spoken to my face about
and
who
why
you have
needed
become.
to step on me to feel tall. Adenike was quiet for a long time on the phone, and then she asked if she could come to Ojota, to Folake's flat, that night. Folake said yes. Adenike arrived a little late after 9, without her makeup, without the gele, without the performance she wore like armor everywhere else in her life. She looked for the first time in years like the girl who used to hold Folake's hand at funerals. She sat on the plastic chair in the one-room flat under the rattling standing fan and cried in a way that was not for an audience because there was no audience left to perform for.
She told Folake the truth. Not all of it flattering, not all of it an excuse. She told her that watching Folake struggle over the years had frightened her, because some small, ugly part of her believed that if she ever stopped moving forward, stopped climbing, stopped proving herself louder than anyone in the room, she would fall back into being the girl whose brother owed dangerous men money, the girl who had once been desperate enough to steal. She told Folake that mocking her at that dinner had nothing to do with Folake at all. It was about Adenike's own fear, projected onto the person safest to aim it at, because she knew, somewhere underneath the cruelty, that Folake would never leave. This is often the truth about people who hurt those closest to them. It is rarely really about the person being hurt. It is about the fear inside the person doing the hurting. A fear so large they would rather wound the one who loves them than sit alone with it. Folake told her that understanding her fear did not erase what she did. She told her that she forgave her because carrying hatred for 11 years of history felt heavier than letting it go, but that forgiveness was not the same as forgetting, and it was not the same as continuing to be her shield while she used Folake as a punchline. Folake told her that from that night forward, their friendship, if it continued at all, would look different. She would no longer be available to clean up messes in private while being humiliated in public. If Adenike wanted a real friend, she needed to become someone capable of real friendship, not a performance of it for an audience that mattered more to her than Folake did. Adenike apologized properly for the first time in 11 years. Not the fast brushed off sorry now she used to toss out when she wanted to move past an argument quickly. A real apology, slow and specific, naming exactly what she had done and why it was wrong. In the weeks after that night in the flat, something shifted between them that Folake did not expect. Adenike began calling not to ask for help, but simply to talk, awkwardly at first, like someone relearning a language she had forgotten she spoke. She asked about Folake's business. She asked for the first time in years what Folake's dreams actually were beyond survival. Folake told her she wanted one day to open her own small bridal studio, somewhere with better lighting than her one-room flat, somewhere brides could come and feel like queens before they ever stepped into a church. Adenike listened. She did not offer to fund it, and Folake did not ask her to, because that was never what she wanted from Adenike. She simply wanted to be heard, the way she had spent 11 years listening to her. The wedding still happened 3 months later. Folake was invited. She almost did not go, but Mama Kemi told her something that stayed with her. She said, Folake, do not let her small mind rob you of your own big heart. Go. Celebrate what is good and carry your dignity with you, because dignity is the one thing nobody can call a pig. Folake went to that wedding wearing a dress she sewed herself, prouder of her own 2 hands than she had ever been of borrowed fabric.
When Adewale gave his speech, he mentioned her by name. He said Adenike had told him a friend who had shown her over many years the true meaning of loyalty, and he thanked Folake for standing by her. Adenike did not tell him the full story. She did not need to. What mattered was that in her own private reckoning, she had finally understood what Folake meant to her, even if the world never knew the details. Adewale's mother, the same woman whose smile had faltered at that dinner months earlier, pulled Folake aside during the reception. She said, "I want you to know something, my dear. That night, I saw what she did to you, and I said something to my son afterward. I do not know if it changed anything in him, but I want you to know that I saw it and I was ashamed on her behalf, even if I did not say so at the table." Folake appreciated that more than she let on, because it takes a certain kind of courage for someone with status to admit, even quietly, that they noticed cruelty and stayed silent in the moment.
As for Adenike and Folake, their friendship today is smaller than it used to be, but it is honest in a way it never was before. Adenike calls less often, but when she calls, she asks how Folake is doing before she asks for anything else. She has learned slowly, painfully, that respect is not something you perform for an audience while starving the people closest to you of it in private. A year later, with a small loan from a cooperative society Mama Kemi introduced her to, and a little seed money she had finally saved without lending it out to anyone else's emergencies, Folake opened that bridal studio. Small, just 2 rooms above a provision store in Ojota, but hers. Mama Kemi cut the ribbon herself, wearing a wrapper she saved for special occasions, telling every customer who walked in that day that she had known Folake since she was small girl, chasing down 4 buses with a makeup kit on her knees. Adenike came too, quietly, without an entourage, and left a bouquet of flowers with a card that simply said, "Thank you for teaching me what real loyalty costs. I'm sorry it took so long to understand." Folake still has that card. She does not know if she will keep it forever, but she has kept it this long, and maybe that says something about how forgiveness actually works, not as a single decision, but as something you keep choosing quietly, 1 card, 1 phone call, 1 boundary at a time. Folake thinks about that dinner often. She thinks about the moment Adenike called her a pig and the whole table laughed, and she thinks about how easy it would have been to let that humiliation define the rest of her life, to shrink, to disappear quietly the way so many of us do when the people who are supposed to love us decide we are the joke instead of the friend. But here is what she learned, and carry this with you if nothing else from this story. The people who mock you loudest in public are very often the people who need you most desperately in private. That does not make their cruelty acceptable. It does not mean you owe them your silence forever, but it means that sometimes the truest form of power is not revenge, it is the quiet decision to stop shrinking, to demand to be seen, and to choose deliberately what kind of person you will be, even when someone else has shown you the worst of who they can become. Folake is not a pig. She never was. She is a woman who was loyal to a fault, who learned at 29 years old, in a 1-room flat in Ojota, under a rattling standing fan, that loyalty without boundaries is just another word for disappearing.
If you were Folake and your best friend humiliated you in public like this,
Would you forgive her, or would you walk away for good? Drop your answer in the comments.
and please don't forget to subscribe.
If this story touched you, if you've ever been humiliated by someone you loved, know your dignity was never up for laughter. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories like this every week.
Bye, see you next time.